In the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and the abolition of state imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capital. During the 19th century, this was a strong demand of the emerging middle classes. Let us take the example of the German speaking regions in the first half of the 19th century. Napoleon's administrative measures had created out of countless small participation principalities a confederation of 39 states. Each of these possessed its own currency and weights and measures. A merchant traveling in 1833 from Hamburg to Nuremberg to sell his goods would have had to pass through 11 customs barriers and pay a custom duty of about 5% at each one of them. Duties were often levied according to the weight or measurement of the goods, as each region had its own system of weights and measures. This involved time consuming calculation. The measure of cloth, for example, was the LA which in each region stood for a different length. An LA of textile material bought in Frankfurt would get you 54.7 centimeter of cloth, in Mainz 55.1 centimeter, in Nuremberg 65.6 centimeter, in Fribourg 53.5 centimeter. Such conditions were viewed as obstacles to economic exchange and growth by the new commercial classes, who argued for the creation of a unified economic territory allowing the unhindered movement of goods, people, and capital. In 1834, a customs union or Wolverine was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. The union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to 2. The creation of a network of railways further stimulated mobility, harnessing economic interest to national unification. A wave of economic nationalism strengthened the wider nationalist sentiments growing at the time. 2.3 A new conservatism after 1815. Following the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, European governments were driven by a spirit of conservatism. Conservatism believed that established traditional institutions of a state and society, like the monarchy, the church, social hierarchies, property, and the family, should be preserved. Most conservatives, however, did not propose a return to the society of pre revolutionary days. Rather, they realized from the changes initiated by Napoleon that modernization could in fact strengthen traditional institutions like the monarchy. It could make a state power more effective and strong. A modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom could strengthen the autocratic monarchies of Europe. In 1815, representatives of the European powers, Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, who had collectively defeated Napoleon, met at Vienna to draw up a settlement for Europe. The Congress was hosted by the Austrian Chancellor Duke Metternich. The delegates drew up the Treaty of Vienna of 1815 with the object of undoing most of the changes that had come about in Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. The Bourbon dynasty, which had been deposed during the French Revolution, was restored to power. The France lost the territories it had annexed under Napoleon. A series of states were set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in future. Thus the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which included Belgium, was set up in the north and Genoa was added to Piedmont in the south. Prussia was given important new territories on its western frontiers, while Austria was given control of northern Italy. But the German Confederation of 39 states that had been set up by Napoleon was left untouched. In the east, Russia was given part of Poland, while Prussia was given a portion of Saxony. The main intention was to restore the monarchies that had been overthrown by Napoleon and create a new conservative order in Europe. Conservative regimes set up in 1815 were autocratic. They did not tolerate criticism and dissent and sought to curb activities that questioned the legitimacy of autocratic governments. Most of them imposed censorship laws to control what was said in newspapers, books, plays, and songs and reflected the ideas of liberty and freedom. Associated with the French Revolution, the memory of the French Revolution nonetheless continued to inspire liberals. One of the major issues taken up by the liberal nationalists who criticized the new conservative order was freedom of the press. 2.4 The revolutionaries. During the years following 1815, the fear of repression drove many liberal nationalists underground. Secret societies sprang up in many European states to train revolutionaries and spread their ideas. To be revolutionary at this time meant a commitment to oppose monarchical forms that had been established after the Vienna Congress and to fight for liberty and freedom. Most of these revolutionaries also saw the creation of nation states as a necessary part of this struggle for freedom. One such individual was the Italian revolutionary Giuseppe Mazzini, born in Genoa in 1807. He became a member of the secret society of the Carbonari. As a young man of 24, he was sent into exile in 1831 for attempting a revolution in Liguria. He subsequently founded two more underground societies, first Young Italy in Marseilles and then Young Europe in Bern, whose members were whose members were like-minded young men from Poland, France, Italy, and the German states. Mazzini believed that God had intended nations to be natural units of mankind. So Italy could not continue to be a patchwork of small states and kingdoms. It had to be forced into a single unified republic within a wider alliance of nations. This unification alone could be the basis of Italian liberty. Following his model, secret societies were set up in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. Mazzini's relentless opposition to monarchy and his vision of democratic republics frightened the conservatives. Metternich described him as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. Some important dates: 1797, Napoleon invades Italy. Napoleonic Wars begin. 1814 to 1815, Fall of Napoleon, the Vienna Peace Settlement. 1821, Greek struggle for independence begins. 1848, revolutions in Europe. Artisans, industrial workers, and peasants revolt against economic hardships. Middle classes demand constitutions and representative governments. Italians, Germans, Magyars, Poles, Sikhs, etc. demand nation states. 1859 to 1870, Unification of Italy. 1866 to 1871, Unification of Germany. 1905, Slav nationalism gathers force in Habsburg and Ottoman empires. New words: suffrage, the right to vote. Conservatism, a political philosophy that stressed the importance of tradition, established institutions and customs, and preferred gradual development to quick change. Source B: Economists began to think in terms of the national economy. They talked of how the nation could develop and what economic measures could help force this nation together. Frederick List, professor of economics at the University of Tübingen in Germany, wrote in 1834: The aim of Gelbrin is to be bind the Germans economically into a nation. It will strengthen the nation materially as much by protecting its interest externally as by stimulating its internal productivity. It ought to awaken and raise national sentiment through a fusion of individual and provincial interest. The German people have realized that a free economic system is the only means of engender national feeling. Discuss. Describe the political ends that list hopes to achieve through economic measures. Activity. Plot on a map of Europe the changes drawn up by the Vienna Congress. Discuss. What is the caricaturist trying to depict? Figure 6. The Club of Thinkers. Anonymous caricature dating to 1820. The plaque on the left bears of the inscription, the most important question of today's meeting, how long will thinking be allowed to us? The board on the right lists the rules of the club, which include the following. First, silence is the first commandment of this learned society. Second, to avoid the eventuality whereby a member of this club may succumb to the temptation of a speech, muzzles will be distributed to members upon entering. Point 3. The Age of Revolutions 1830 to 1848. As conservative regimes tried to consolidate their power, liberalism and nationalism came to be increasingly associated with revolution in many regions of Europe, such as the Italian and German states. The provinces of the Ottoman Empire, Ireland, and Poland. These revolutions were led by the liberal nationalists belonging to the educated middle class elite, among whom were professors, school teachers, clerks, and members of the commercial middle classes. The first upheaval took place in France in July 1830. The Bourbon kings, who had been restored to power during the conservative reaction after 1815, were now overthrown by liberal revolutionaries who installed a constitutional monarchy with Louis Philippe at its head. When France sneezes, Metternich once remarked, the rest of Europe catches cold. The July Revolution sparked an uprising in Brussels which led to Belgium breaking away from the United Kingdom of the Netherlands. An event that mobilized nationalist feelings among the educated elite across Europe was the Greek War of Independence. Greece had been part of the Ottoman Empire since the 15th century. The growth of revolutionary nationalism in Europe sparked off a struggle for independence amongst the Greeks, which began in 1821. Nationalists in Greece got support from other Greeks living in exile and also from many West Europeans who had sympathized for ancient Greek culture. Poets and artists lauded Greece as the cradle of European civilization and mobilized public opinion to support its struggle against a Muslim empire. The English poet Lord Byron organized funds and later went to fight in the war, where he died of fever in 1824. Finally, the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. 3.1. The Romantic Imagination and National Feeling. The development of nationalism did not come about only through wars and territorial expansion. Culture played an important role in creating the idea of the nation. Art and poetry, stories and music helped express the shape nationalist feelings. Let us look at Romanticism, a cultural movement which sought to develop a particular form of nationalist sentiment. Romantic artists and poets generally criticize the glorification of reason and science and focused instead on emotions, intuition, and mystical feelings. Their effort was to create a sense of shared collective heritage, a common cultural past, as the basis of a nation. Other romantics, such as the German philosopher John Gottfried Herder 1744-1803 claimed that true German culture was to be discovered among the common people. Das Volk. It was through folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances that the true spirit of nation, Yorks, Yorksgist, was popularized. So, collecting and recording these forms of folk culture was essential to the project of nation building. The emphasis on vernacular language and the collection of local folklore was not just to recover an ancient national spirit, but also to carry the modern nationalist message to large audiences who were mostly illiterate. This was especially so in the case of Poland, which had been partitioned at the end of the 18th century by the great powers Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Even though Poland no longer existed as an independent territory, national feelings were kept alive through music and language. Karol Kopinski, for example, celebrated the national struggle through his operas and music turning folk dances like the Polonaise and Mazurka into nationalist symbols. Language too played an important role in developing nationalist sentiments. After Russian occupation, the Polish language was forced out to schools and the Russian language was imposed everywhere. In 1831, an armed rebellion against Russian rule took place, which was ultimately crushed. Following this, many members of the clergy in Poland began to use language as a weapon of national resistance. Polish was used for church gatherings and all religious instruction. As a result, a large number of priests and bishops were put in jail or sent to Siberia by the Russian authorities as punishment for their refusal to preach in Russian. The use of Polish came to be seen as a symbol of the struggle against Russian dominance.